What if the person holding your salvation wasn't who you expected? What if they were someone you'd never noticed? Someone whose life you'd never considered important enough to remember? Vincent Castellano sat alone in the corner booth of Rosie's Diner at 2 a.m, the same booth he'd occupied every Thursday for 6 years. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but his hand still gripped the cup like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to this world. His daughter Elena had been missing for 47 days. 47 mornings he'd woken up to an empty house. 47 nights he'd fallen asleep wondering if she was still breathing. The police had given up. His connections had dried up. Even his enemies had gone quiet, which terrified him more than anything. Then the waitress, the one with tired eyes who'd served him coffee without a word for all those years, slid into the seat across from him and whispered 5 words that would change both their lives forever. "I know where she is." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Vincent looked up slowly, his gray eyes meeting the waitress's for what might have been the first time ever. She wasn't young, maybe 55 or so, with auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started to come loose during her shift. Her name tag read Margaret, though he'd never bothered to learn it before. Her hands were shaking as she placed them flat on the table, and he noticed the wedding ring that had worn a groove into her finger over the years. "What did you say?" His voice came out rougher than he intended, scratched raw from weeks of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers to a God he'd stopped believing in decades ago. Margaret glanced toward the kitchen, where the night cook was scraping down the grill, then back at Vincent. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across her face. "Your daughter, Elena. I know where they're keeping her." She spoke quietly but clearly, each word measured and deliberate. Vincent's heart began to pound so hard he could hear it in his ears. In his line of work, he'd learned to spot liars, and something in Margaret's eyes told him she was telling the truth. How? The question came out as barely a whisper. He'd put the word out to every contact he had, called in every favor owed to him over 30 years in organized crime. He'd leveraged relationships with people in 3 states, offered rewards that would set someone up for life. And this waitress, this woman who'd served him eggs and coffee for 6 years without him ever really seeing her, knew something nobody else did? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "My daughter works at a place, a house up in the mountains, about 2 hours north. She's a nurse, or she was supposed to be. She got mixed up with some people, got into debt with the wrong folks. They made her work for them, taking care of people they keep there." Her voice broke slightly. "She called me 3 weeks ago, crying. Said there was a girl there, teenager, dark curly hair. Said the girl kept saying her father's name. Vincent. Over and over. Vincent will find me. Vincent will come." The diner suddenly felt too small, too bright, too loud. Vincent's mind raced through possibilities and dangers, through hope and terror in equal measure. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" His hands had released the coffee cup and now rested on the table, inches from Margaret's. "I was scared," she admitted, and the honesty in her voice cut through his anger before it could fully form. "My daughter begged me not to tell anyone. Said they'd kill her if anyone found out. Said they'd kill the girl, too. But I've watched you come in here every Thursday for years. I've seen you reading the paper, always leaving a good tip. Always polite even when you looked like the weight of the world was crushing you. And then when your daughter disappeared, I saw your picture in the news with her. Both of you smiling at some charity event. I saw a father, not whatever the papers say you are. Just a father missing his little girl." Vincent's throat tightened. Elena had dragged him to that hospital fundraiser, made him put on a suit and smile for the cameras. She'd been studying pre-med, wanted to help people. She had her mother's heart, soft where his had turned to stone. "Where is she?" "I'll tell you," Margaret said, but she held up a hand as he started to rise from the booth. "But first, you need to promise me something." Vincent sat back down, every muscle in his body coiled tight as a spring. He'd been waiting for this, the price. Everyone wanted something. "My daughter, when you get Elena out, I need you to get Sarah out too. And I need you to promise me you won't hurt her. She's not a bad person. She's just scared and trapped and she made mistakes. Please, promise me you'll bring them both home safe, and you'll make sure nobody comes after Sarah for helping." The fluorescent light flickered above them. In the kitchen, The cook had started mopping the floor. Outside, a lone car drove past on the empty street. Vincent thought about all the promises he'd broken in his life, all the lines he'd crossed. He thought about his wife Maria, dead 8 years now, and what she would want him to do. He thought about Elena, 17 years old and terrified wherever she was. "I promise," he said, and he meant it. Margaret's shoulders sagged with relief, and she pulled a folded napkin from her apron pocket. On it, written in shaky handwriting, was an address. Vincent didn't go alone, but he didn't bring an army either. Just Marco, his oldest friend, the only person he trusted completely. They drove through the night in Marco's truck, an unremarkable vehicle that wouldn't draw attention. The address led them deep into the Catskill Mountains, where scattered houses dotted the hillsides and roads wound through dense forests. As dawn began to break, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they found the house, a large colonial set back from the road, isolated but well-maintained. "Could be a trap," Marco muttered, watching the house through binoculars. Vincent had considered that. Margaret could have been sent by his enemies, could be leading him into an ambush. But something in her eyes, the way her voice had broken when she talked about her daughter, told him this was real. "We go in quiet. We find the girls, we get out." They waited until full daylight, watching the patterns of movement inside. 2 men came out to smoke on the front porch around 7. A delivery truck dropped off groceries at 8. It was organized, professional, which made sense. These weren't street thugs. This was a sophisticated operation. At 9 o'clock, Vincent made his move. He walked up to the front door and knocked. When one of the guards answered, Vincent didn't give him time to react. The confrontation was brief and efficient, born from decades of experience in situations exactly like this. Within minutes, he and Marco had secured the first floor and were moving upstairs. His heart hammered in his chest with each step. What if Elena wasn't here? What if Margaret had been wrong? What if they were too late? The third door on the left was locked from the outside. Vincent's hands trembled as he worked the lock, something he hadn't done in years. Marco stood watch at his back. The lock clicked. The door swung open. And there, sitting on a bed by the window, thin and pale but alive, was Elena. Her dark curly hair had grown longer. She had a bruise fading on her cheek, but her eyes, those eyes so much like her mother's, widened with recognition and disbelief. "Dad?" The word came out as a question, as if she couldn't quite believe he was real. Vincent crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. She collapsed against him, and he felt her whole body shaking with sobs. He held her tight, one hand cradling the back of her head like he used to do when she was small and had nightmares. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "I've got you, baby girl. You're safe now." They stayed like that for a long moment, and Vincent felt something crack open in his chest, some dam he'd built years ago to survive his life, and tears streamed down his face into her hair. Marco cleared his throat from the doorway, and Vincent looked up to see him pointing to the room next door. They found Sarah in the next room, curled up on a chair, wearing nurse's scrubs and looking terrified. She was younger than Vincent had expected, maybe 25, with her mother's same auburn hair and exhausted eyes. "Please," she gasped when she saw them. "Please don't hurt me. I tried to help her. I gave her extra food. I told my mom where she was." "I know," Vincent said, and he saw the confusion flicker across her face. "Your mother sent me. We're getting you out of here too." The relief that washed over Sarah's face reminded him so much of Margaret's expression in the diner that his chest tightened. If this moment has touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up. Let us know you're watching and feeling this journey with us. But as they prepared to leave, Vincent heard voices downstairs. More men had arrived, perhaps guards returning from an errand. Perhaps someone had triggered an alert. They were trapped on the second floor with both girls to protect and no clear exit. Marco met Vincent's eyes, and in that look passed 30 years of friendship and unspoken understanding. "The back stairs," Marco said. "I'll hold them off. Get the girls out. Marco—" Vincent started, but his friend shook his head. "You promised Margaret you'd get both girls home safe. You promised. Now keep your promise, Vincent. Go be a father. I'll be right behind you." But they both knew that might be a lie. The kind of lie you tell out of love. Vincent wanted to argue, wanted to find another way. But Elena's hand gripped his arm tightly, and Sarah was crying quietly behind them. He had to choose. After a lifetime of making hard choices, this should have been easy, but it tore him apart. They ran. Down the back stairs, through a side door Marco had spotted earlier, across the yard to where they'd hidden the truck in the trees. Behind them, Vincent heard shouting, then gunshots. His heart screamed at him to go back, but his promise to Margaret, to Elena, to himself pulled him forward. They reached the truck. He pushed both girls into the back seat and climbed behind the wheel. His hands slick with sweat and fear, and something that felt like both victory and loss. As he started the engine and pulled onto the road, his phone rang. It was Marco. "I'm out," his friend said, breathing hard. "Took the long way around. Lost them in the woods. Meet me at the diner." Vincent exhaled a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. They'd done it. Against impossible odds, they'd gotten both girls out alive. But as the adrenaline began to fade and the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, Vincent realized the hard part was just beginning. At the hospital, Elena refused to let go of Vincent's hand while the doctors examined her. Physically, she was okay, mostly dehydrated and underweight, with some bruises that would heal. But Vincent could see the damage that didn't show on x-rays, the way she flinched at sudden movements, how her eyes darted to the door constantly as if expecting someone to burst through. Sarah sat in the waiting room with her mother Margaret, who'd arrived within the hour, both of them crying and holding each other tight. Marco kept watch near the entrance, though he looked like he'd aged 10 years in a single night. "They took me after my volunteer shift at the clinic," Elena finally told Vincent that evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was walking to my car. Someone grabbed me, put something over my face. When I woke up, I was in that room." She paused, staring at her hands in her lap. "They said they were going to use me to get to you, to make you do something for them, or give them something. I never found out what. They just kept me there waiting." Vincent felt rage and guilt war inside him. This had happened because of him, because of the life he'd chosen, the enemies he'd made. His daughter had been punished for his sins. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "Elena, I'm so sorry. This is my fault." She looked at him then, really looked at him. And he saw his wife Maria in her face so clearly it hurt. "They told me you'd never find me, that nobody cared enough to look. But I knew you would, even when days turned into weeks and I started to lose hope. Something inside me knew you'd come." She squeezed his hand. "Sarah helped me, Dad. She snuck me books to read, extra blankets when it got cold at night. She talked to me through the door when the guards weren't around. She told me about her mom, how she worked at some diner and made the best apple pie. That's when I realized, that's when I told Sarah your name, told her where you might be. I hoped maybe somehow." The pieces clicked together in Vincent's mind. Elena had given Sarah the information. Sarah had told Margaret, and Margaret had taken the biggest risk of her life walking up to him in that diner. 3 women, none of them with any power or protection in his world, had orchestrated his daughter's rescue while he'd been sitting helpless in a booth drinking cold coffee. The realization humbled him in a way nothing else ever had. The police came, of course. There were questions, investigations, complications that Vincent's lawyer handled while he stayed by Elena's bedside. But the real crisis came 3 days later when Elena looked at him with clear eyes and said, "I can't go back to the house, Dad. I can't live in that world anymore." Your world. The words landed like physical blows. Vincent had thought once he got her back, everything would return to normal. But normal was gone. Normal had been destroyed the moment someone had decided his daughter was a useful tool for leverage. "What do you want?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "I want a different life, a quiet life. I want to finish school somewhere far from here. Somewhere nobody knows who you are or what you do. I want to be just Elena Moretti, not Vincent Castellano's daughter." She wasn't angry when she said it, just tired and sad and incredibly brave. "And I want you to make a different choice too." "What choice?" Vincent asked, though part of him already knew. Elena had always been smarter than him, had always seen through to the heart of things. "The choice Mom wanted you to make before she died, to walk away, To be something other than this. She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything his life represented. You got me back. You kept your promise to that waitress. You saved Sarah. You did something good, Dad. Maybe it's time to do more good things. Have you ever faced a moment where someone you love asked you to change everything about your life? Have you stood at that crossroads between who you've been and who you could become? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. That night, Vincent sat in the hospital cafeteria with Marco, both of them nursing bad coffee and exhaustion. She wants me to walk away, Vincent said. Marco nodded slowly. He'd probably guessed. You thinking about it? Yeah, Vincent admitted. I'm thinking about it. Outside the window, the city lights sparkled in the darkness, the same city he'd operated in for 30 years. He'd built an empire here, earned respect and fear in equal measure. But what was it worth if it had cost him his daughter's peace? What was any of it worth without Maria, without Elena safe and happy? I'm thinking about it too, Marco said quietly. We're not young anymore, Vincent. Maybe it's time to be old in a different way, a better way. The meeting happened on neutral ground, in a church basement of all places. Vincent had called in every contact he still trusted, letting them know he wanted out. Leaving the life wasn't simple. There were obligations, territories, arrangements that had been in place for years. But Vincent had one advantage. He'd been careful, smart, and strategic for 3 decades. He'd kept records, maintained leverage, and earned enough respect that when he said he wanted to step back, people listened. The most important conversation was with Dominic Russo, who'd been his partner in several ventures, and was powerful enough to either bless Vincent's exit or make it impossible. They sat across from each other in folding chairs, 2 aging men who'd survived when so many others hadn't. You're serious about this? Dominic asked, studying Vincent's face. My daughter almost died because of the life I chose, Vincent said simply. I got a second chance. I'm not wasting it. He slid a folder across the table. Everything's in here. Clean transfers of interests, contacts for transitions, recommendations for people who can step into various roles. I've spent the last week setting this up. I'm not trying to cause problems or leave anyone in a bad position. I'm just done. Dominic opened the folder, scanned the contents, then looked up at Vincent with something like respect. You always did think ahead. Most guys who try to leave, they just disappear and hope nobody notices. You're dismantling everything properly. He paused. What'll you do? Vincent hadn't let himself think that far ahead until Elena had planted the seed. But now, sitting in this church basement, the answer felt obvious. I'm going to help my daughter heal, going to be the father I should have been all along. Maybe find some way to make up for the damage I've done. He thought about Margaret, about Sarah, about all the people whose lives had intersected with his. There's a waitress who took a huge risk to help me. She's going to need protection. Her and her daughter, I need to know they'll be safe. Consider it done, Dominic said. They're under protection. Nobody touches them. He stood up, extended his hand. Vincent shook it, feeling the weight of decades of complicated history in that grip. You're a lucky man, Vincent. Not many get to walk away. Fewer still get their kids back. Don't waste it. I won't, Vincent promised. And it was the second promise in a week that he absolutely intended to keep. The paperwork took weeks. Lawyers, accountants, careful restructuring of assets and interests. Vincent discovered he'd accumulated more money than he'd realized. Enough that he could provide for Elena and himself comfortably for the rest of their lives without touching anything connected to his old business. He set up trust funds, made charitable donations to hospitals and victim services. Each transaction felt like washing away a layer of grime he'd been carrying for years. Elena watched all of this from her apartment, a new place Vincent had helped her find in a quiet neighborhood across town. She was seeing a therapist twice a week, slowly processing her trauma, slowly rebuilding her sense of safety in the world. She'd decided to take a year off before returning to school, and Vincent supported her completely. One afternoon she called him over for lunch, and he found Margaret and Sarah there too. We wanted to do something nice, Elena explained, to say thank you to everyone. She'd made pasta, her mother's recipe, and the 4 of them sat around her small kitchen table like an unlikely family. Margaret told stories about her years at the diner, And Sarah talked about going back to nursing school, this time with a clean slate and no debts. Vincent mostly listened, watching these three women who'd saved each other in different ways, feeling grateful and humbled and oddly at peace. "What you did was incredibly brave," Vincent told Margaret. "You didn't have to help me. You risked everything." Margaret smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "When you're a parent, you do what you have to do. You understand that." She glanced at Sarah. "We both got our girls back safe. That's all that matters." If you've been moved by this story, please subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales of redemption, courage, and the power of second chances. We share stories every week that remind us of the good in people. As the afternoon sun slanted through Elena's windows, Vincent felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not the desperate hope of those 47 days when Elena was missing, but a quiet, steady hope that maybe the rest of his life could be different. Better. That maybe he could become the man his daughter believed he could be. The man Maria had always hoped he'd become. Sarah was telling a funny story about a patient she'd had during her clinical rotations, and everyone was laughing. In that moment, sitting in his daughter's kitchen with these women who'd shown more courage than most people he'd known in his old life, Vincent understood something profound. Real strength wasn't about power or control or fear. Real strength was about vulnerability, about taking risks for love, about choosing to change even when change felt impossible. These women had taught him that. His daughter had taught him that. And for the first time in a very long time, Vincent Castellano felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. 6 months passed like water finding new channels to flow through. Elena returned to school at a small college upstate, somewhere nobody knew her history, where she could be just another student passionate about helping people. She called Vincent twice a week, and he drove up to visit her once a month, bringing care packages and sitting in campus coffee shops while she told him about her classes and her friends and the normal life she was building. Each visit, he saw her healing, saw the light returning to her eyes, and his heart felt fuller than he could remember. Vincent sold the big house, the one that had felt like a museum after Maria died, and a tomb after Elena disappeared. He bought a modest place near the water, spent his mornings walking along the shore, and his afternoons reading books he'd never had time for before. He volunteered at a youth center twice a week, helping kids with their homework, listening to their troubles, trying to be the kind of positive male presence he'd never been in his old life. The work was quiet and unremarkable, and it filled him with a satisfaction that all his years of power and influence never had. Marco had followed his lead, stepping away from the business and moving to Florida where his sister lived. They talked on the phone every Sunday, two old men swapping stories about their new, peaceful lives, marveling at how they'd made it this far. "We should have done this years ago," Marco said during one call, and Vincent agreed. But maybe they couldn't have done it years ago. Maybe they'd needed to be broken down, to face the consequences of their choices, to be saved by the courage of others before they could find the strength to change. Margaret still worked at Rosie's diner, though Vincent had offered to help her retire comfortably. "I like the work," she'd told him. "I like the customers, the routine, the feeling of being useful. Besides, where else would we meet for coffee?" Because that's what they did now, every Thursday morning. Vincent would come in and they'd sit in that same corner booth, and they'd talk about their daughters, about life, about second chances. Margaret had become his friend, his confidant, one of the few people who knew everything about him and accepted him anyway. Sarah had graduated from nursing school and was working at a children's hospital, finally doing the work she'd always wanted to do. She and Elena had become close, bonded by their shared trauma and recovery. Sometimes the four of them would have dinner together, these unlikely people brought together by crisis and compassion, creating their own kind of family. At one of these dinners, Sarah showed them her nursing certification, and Margaret cried happy tears, and Elena hugged her tight, and Vincent felt his eyes sting with emotion. "Mom and I are thinking about moving," Sarah mentioned over dessert. "There's a nice apartment complex near the hospital, much closer to work." Vincent immediately offered to help with the deposit, the moving costs, anything they needed. He'd set aside money specifically for taking care of Margaret and Sarah, making sure they never had to worry. It was the least he could do for the woman who'd saved his daughter's life. The anniversary of Elena's rescue came and went quietly. Vincent had thought he might feel anxious or sad, reliving those terrible days of searching, but instead he felt grateful. Grateful for Margaret's courage. Grateful for Sarah's kindness. Grateful for Marco's loyalty. Grateful for Elena's strength and forgiveness. Grateful for the chance to become something better than what he'd been. One evening, Elena called him with news. She'd been accepted into a study abroad program, working at a medical clinic in Costa Rica for a summer. "It's a little scary," she admitted, "being so far away, but I think I need to do this. I need to prove to myself that I can be brave, that I can go out into the world and not be afraid." Vincent's first instinct was fear, the same fear that had gripped him since the moment she disappeared, but he pushed it down, replaced it with trust. "You are brave," he told her. "You're the bravest person I know. You're going to do amazing things, Elena. I'm so proud of you." After they hung up, he sat on his porch watching the sun set over the water, thinking about how life moved in unexpected directions. He'd been a criminal, a man people feared, someone who'd caused harm in pursuit of power. But now he was a father, a friend, a volunteer at a youth center. He was trying to do better, to be better, and some days that felt like enough. The last person he'd expected to hear from was Dominic Russo, but 6 months after Vincent had walked away, Dominic called. "I wanted you to know," he said without preamble, "the people who took Elena, they've been dealt with, completely. They'll never hurt anyone again." Vincent felt a complicated mix of emotions, relief and something darker that he tried not to examine too closely. "Thank you," he said simply. "Now you can really move on," Dominic replied. "No loose ends. No looking over your shoulder. You earned your peace, Vincent. Enjoy it. If you've enjoyed this story of redemption, courage, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave us a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Your support means everything to us. Vincent Castellano had spent 30 years being someone the world saw as a villain. But 3 women, a waitress named Margaret, a nurse named Sarah, and his daughter Elena, had shown him that it's never too late to change, that courage comes in quiet moments of decision, that love is worth more than power, that promises kept can heal broken things, that second chances, when given with grace, can transform lives. He'd been given his second chance, and he would spend the rest of his days being worthy of it. Some stories end with a bang, but the best ones end like this, with a man sitting on a porch watching the sunset, at peace with who he's become, and grateful for the people who helped him get there. Thank you for joining us on this journey.